He stood in his own driveway and laughed at my car in front of 6 people. He had absolutely no idea that the sticker on his bumper carried my name. Neither did the 3 payments he still had not made. Welcome back to Revenge Stories. Grab your snacks, get comfortable, and remember the people in these stories had every chance to behave themselves. They simply chose wrong. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. You are going to love it here. My name is Bernard Calloway and I am 58 years old. I have owned Calloway Motor Group in Burlington, Ontario for nearly 27 years. We move somewhere between 400 and 600 vehicles a year across 3 locations. We sponsor the Minor Hockey League. We have a sign on the Queensway that I have always thought was slightly too large, but my general manager insisted and eventually you let people have things. If you walked into one of my lots on a Tuesday afternoon, you would find me in the back office eating a sandwich and quietly debating with my accountant. You would not think I owned the place. That is not false modesty. That is simply what I look like. Before I tell you what happened next, tell me where you are watching this from. I would genuinely love to know. Life was good before all of this began. My wife Pauline and I had been married for 31 years. She teaches music at the elementary school down the street and has opinions about tuning that I have never fully understood, but have learned to respect. We had dinner at the same Italian place every Friday and she always ordered the same thing and I always pretended to read the menu. Our daughter Stephanie had married Troy about 4 years earlier. We liked Troy at the wedding. That was the last time we completely liked Troy. Troy Hendricks was 45 years old and he worked in financial services, which in his case meant he talked about money constantly and worried about what people thought of it. He had moved Stephanie into a house in Oakville that was very large and very new and had a driveway that he seemed to treat as a kind of stage. He drove a silver Audi Q8 that he mentioned by name in casual conversation more than most people mention their children. He was not a bad person in the way that truly bad people are bad. He was the kind of person who needed to feel ahead of everyone in the room, and when he could not find a way to do that naturally, he would create one. That was the version of Troy I came to understand slowly over 4 years. The first sign that something was building came at Stephanie's birthday dinner about 14 months before any of this came to a head. Troy made a comment about my car. I drove a 2011 Buick LeSabre that had 190,000 kilometers on it and a small dent above the rear passenger wheel well. I liked that car. Pauline had picked the color. Troy looked at it in the driveway when we arrived and said something to the effect of, "Dad, you really have to treat yourself at some point." He said it the way people say things when they want others to hear them. A neighbor happened to be getting her mail. I said I liked the Buick. He said something about resale value. I said the Buick was not for sale. He smiled the smile of a man who thought he had just lost a small argument, but won a larger one. I noticed it, but I gave it to him. He was young. He wanted to feel important. I understood that impulse even if I found the delivery unnecessary. He did it again at Christmas. He asked in front of Pauline's sister whether I had ever considered leasing something newer. He said Burlington has some excellent dealerships and I said yes. I had heard that and I had to work very hard to keep my face completely still. Pauline looked at me from across the table. She raised one eyebrow exactly 1 centimeter and then went back to her meal. She is extraordinarily good at that. The moment that changed everything happened on a Sunday afternoon in March. Stephanie and Troy had the family over for a late lunch. Troy had parked the Audi in the driveway and left my Buick on the street. I did not mind. Then his neighbor from across the road came over with his wife, a couple called the Ferriers, and Troy took them on what I can only describe as an informal tour of the vehicle. He talked about the sound system. He talked about the adaptive suspension. He talked about the financing terms as if they were a personal achievement. Then he looked at my Buick sitting at the curb and he laughed. Not a small laugh. A full laugh with a little shake of the head. He said to the Ferriers that was his father-in-law's car and said he kept offering to take him to a dealership and the old man just would not listen. There were 6 people standing there. Stephanie was not among them. She was inside. I smiled. I said the Buick had never let me down. Troy shrugged and kept talking. I stood there on that driveway and I thought about the dealership sticker on the back of his Audi. Calloway Motor Group, Burlington. I had seen it the moment I arrived and filed it away without thinking much about it, but standing there listening to him laugh, I pulled it back out and looked at it more carefully in my mind. I went home that evening and I pulled the sales records. Troy Mitchell Hendricks, financed November 14th, 2 years prior. Calloway Motor Group, Burlington. 1 silver Audi Q8, full financing package, 48-month term. And as of the date I was looking at those records, he was 11 weeks and 3 payments behind. I sat with that for a long time. If you have made it this far, do us one quick favor. Subscribe. A lot of people watch without ever doing it, but it costs you nothing and means everything to us. Thank you genuinely. I called my friend Dennis Okafor the next morning. Dennis and I have been friends since we were 22 years old. He is a retired civil engineer and the most practical human being I have ever met. He answered on the second ring the way he always does, like he had been expecting the call for several days. I told him everything. The driveway, the farriers, the laugh, the finance file. Dennis was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "So he laughed at the sign on the back of his own car?" I said more or less, yes. Dennis made a sound that was somewhere between a laugh and a sigh. He said, "Bernard, you have to be very careful here because Stephanie is in the middle of this." I said I understood that. He said, "You also cannot let a man do that to you in front of witnesses and simply walk away." I said I understood that, too. He said the question is what kind of man you want to be when you handle this. I thought about that for the rest of the day. I called my lawyer the following week. Her name is Rachel Fong and she has been handling my business affairs for 11 years. She is extremely precise and has what I would describe as a professionally warm demeanor, meaning she is kind, but would not hesitate to itemize you if it came to it. I explained the situation. The ridicule, the finance file, the arrears. She listened without interrupting, which is one of her best qualities. When I finished, she said, "Bernard, are you looking for legal remedies or are you looking for justice?" I said I wanted to handle the finance situation through proper channels and I wanted Troy to understand the complete picture at a moment of my choosing. She said, "That is entirely within your rights." She said we send a standard arrears notice and if you want, we schedule a formal account review, which given the amount outstanding, you would be well within policy to request. I said, "Let us schedule it for 6 weeks from now." She said, "That gives you time." I said, "That is exactly what I need." Then she said one more thing. She said, "Do not do this at a family dinner, Bernard." I said, "Of course not." I absolutely did it at a family dinner. It was a Sunday in late April. Pauline made a roast. Stephanie and Troy came over and Troy arrived in the Audi and parked it in our driveway this time, which I noted. He was in good spirits. He talked about a conference he had attended in Toronto. He complimented the roast in the way people compliment things when they want credit for noticing. After the main course, I got up and came back to the table with a folder. Not a dramatic folder, just a blue manila folder with some papers in it. Troy looked at it the way you look at something when you are not sure yet whether to be concerned. I sat down. I said, "Troy, I want to talk to you about your vehicle account." He said, "My what?" I said, "Your Audi, the Q8. Financed November 14th through Callaway Motor Group in Burlington." He went very still. Stephanie looked at me, then at Troy. I said, "We have been patient about the arrears because you are family, but at this point the account is officially under review." Troy said, "I did not know that was your dealership." I said, "I know you did not." There was a silence at that table that had some real weight to it. He said, "I was going to catch up on the payments." I said, "I believe you." I said that is why we are having this conversation here instead of by registered mail. I said I would like to work out a catch-up schedule and I would like to do that calmly because you are my daughter's husband and I want this resolved cleanly. Stephanie put down her fork very slowly. She looked at Troy for a long moment. Then she looked at me and said, "Dad, how long have you known?" I said, "About 6 weeks." She said, "And you waited." I said I wanted to give Troy the opportunity to come to me directly. He had my number. Troy said nothing. I said, "Troy, you are a smart man. I think you understand the position you are in. I would like you to think carefully about the kind of person you want to be going forward in all of the ways that applies to." He nodded slowly. That was all he did. He nodded. Rachel formalized the catch-up schedule the following Tuesday. Troy made all 3 outstanding payments within 10 days. He has been current every month since. I have not raised the driveway incident directly and I do not intend to. Stephanie had her own conversation with him that I was not part of and have not asked about in detail. Pauline said whatever was said in that conversation. Troy came out of it looking like a man who had recently been introduced to himself for the first time. She thought that was probably useful. The Buick is still in our driveway. I have no plans for it. If you have made it this far, do us one quick favor. Subscribe. A lot of people watch without ever doing it, but it costs you nothing and means everything to us. Thank you genuinely. 2 Sundays after the dinner, Pauline and I drove to Niagara-on-the-Lake for the afternoon. We had lunch at a little restaurant on the main street where they put too much dressing on the salad and I never say anything about it. On the drive back, Pauline was quiet for a while in that comfortable way she is quiet. Then she said, "Do you feel better?" I thought about it honestly. I said, "I think so." I said, "I did not enjoy any of it." She said, "I know." I said, "I just wanted him to understand the complete picture." She said, "He does now." I said, "Yes, he does." She looked out the window at the lake going past, and then she said, "Bernard, the Buick needs new wiper blades." I said, "I know." She said, "You have been saying that since October." I said, "I will do it this week." She said, "You said that in October, too." She was not wrong about that. I got the wiper blades the following Tuesday. They took 4 minutes to install. I have no idea why I waited 7 months. I will not be taking questions about that.